Okay, everybody. So we've just concluded our tour here of the Knesset. It was a brief tour. We have the high privilege of being in the presence of officers from the United States Army in active service. This is a crown jewel in the work of the MirYam Institute, and we're very, very pleased to have the opportunity to interview you, Simcha Rothman. Thank you for making time, and thank you for your staff as well, to them for making the time to be with us. During the course of this tour, may I call you Simcha? Is that okay?
By all means.
Right. So during the course of this tour, the people hear different perspectives about the state of Israel. And there have been multiple perspectives so far, and we're just in day 2 of the tour.
That's Israel.
That have spoken about the judicial reform, not in detail, but they've alluded to it being a disastrous situation, a dangerous situation, a situation that's not going to come to pass. And with all of that having been said, it was very important to us to hear from you, and to hear from you directly, and then to take some questions from the audience as much as we're able to do if time permits. Now, I just want to begin by asking you, please, in very brief terms, I've got a list of questions, but I want to ask you in very brief terms, just tell them about your exact role and position now, and also talk to them a bit about the party to which you belong.
Okay, so today I am the chair of the Knesset Constitution, Law and Justice Committee. Israel does not have a constitution, so one might ask why there is a constitution committee to a country without a constitution. So that's exactly our role. Our role in the Knesset is to create basic laws that one day might become a constitution if the Knesset and the public in Israel choose so. So we make basic laws that every one of them is like a standalone basic law, but one day maybe it would be a constitution. That's up to the people of Israel to decide when and if. But that's the committee I'm the chair of. I am also the chair of the fraction in the Knesset for the Religious Zionist Party, which I'm a member of. Religious Zionist Party is 7 seats party in Israel, but we were elected as part of a list of, and we got 14 seats together. But the system is a little bit more complicated than that. But we are part of the coalition, of course, which made of 64 seats in the Knesset today.
So right now, we find ourselves, the folks here have landed in the midst of, some people call it judicial reform, some people call it judicial overhaul. You have decided to champion and to move forward judicial reform, I think you would term it. Tell us why you felt it was time to do that, and if you can, begin by just explaining what...
Reform and overall are 2 positive terms, I think, to what's happening in Israel.
Wonderful.
Some use it as a negative. As a negative, or...
But tell us about the current composition of the Judicial Select Committee, and then we'll get to how you want to adjust it.
Okay. But first, if I may, I want to say that... in my point of view, there are people here that agree with me. There are people not here in the building, of course. In this room, of course, you all agree with me. But I'm talking about here in the building. Some people disagree with me. Some people agree with me. And me is not me, the person, Simcha Rothman. Me as the coalition, because on this issue, I don't think there is any other issue this 64 seats coalition is united as on this subject of the need for judicial reform and the main aspects of course, details may vary, but there is 100% agreement that needs to be done. It was promised before the elections, many reasons. But I think the main, it was published today in an op-ed in Haaretz, which is one of the newspapers in Israel, not a right-wing newspaper, extreme left from my point of view, but it was an op-ed by Professor Alan Dershowitz. Now, Professor Alan Dershowitz from the US, he opposed, and he said it specifically in this article, he opposed almost every part of the reform. He's not supportive of what I do. But he said, and I think that's more important coming from him, that even if all aspects of the reforms that I am pushing forward will pass, Israel will still be a vibrant democracy. It's a battle between two views in Israel on the position of the court, what its role should be, how his judges should be elected, but it's not the end of democracy in one way or the other. It's within the sphere of what's considered democratic country all over the world. And that's very important because put aside the political debate people hear, I find myself in a very strange situations when people that I adopted a softer version of what they offered just a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, call me extremist. And you can check. They offered things that I wouldn't imagine to offer because it's too extreme. I took a step back. I moderated their offers, and they call me this extreme. So it's, I don't know if you know it, because there is no kind of discourse like that in the US, that people are objecting to stuff just because the other side offers it. That's something very unique to Israel. But you might think that it happened somewhere else also. So that's the situation. And if this reform, almost by word, will be put to vote in the Knesset, and people will be obligated to vote what they voted on the same issue 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I won't have 64, I will have 90 Knesset members supporting it. So that's, to begin with, and okay, we know the rules of the game. Some would say I did it the same when I was in the opposition, I objected to things that I now support. That's the rules of the game, but I think it takes a lot of the tension off the table. And I think that's the way it should work in Israel and in any other country that you might think of, that there is this kind of tension between political parties. Now about the Judicial Selection Committee.
Tell us the composition now and what you want.
So in Israel, unlike most democratic countries, we don't have, our elected officials do not choose the judges. That's not the case in most democratic countries, definitely in most democratic countries which share the same common law system. In Israel, we have a committee of 9. The committee of 9 is made of 2 members of the Knesset, usually one from the coalition, one from the opposition, but that's sometimes the case, not always. 2 ministers, which in Israel it means that are usually Knesset members also, besides being ministers, and members of the coalition, and 2 members of the bar, and 3 Supreme Court justices. Meaning the entire public in Israel, coalition and opposition, it's 4 out of the 9. Meaning there is a majority of unelected officials, professionals, that chooses the judges. To make things even a little bit worse, in my point of view, in order to appoint a Supreme Court justice, that's the committee appoints judges to all levels. But if you want to appoint someone to the Supreme Court, you need to have a 7 out of 9 majority. Meaning, if the 3 justices sitting in the committee object to someone, you cannot appoint someone to the court. So you have, in my point of view, you have self-perpetuating, self-preserving court. And that created an ever-growing distance between the public, where the public is in Israel, and where the court is. In the US, when you had this kind of distance, so over the time, the court was changing. To the good, to the bad, that depends what you think politically, but the court has changed over the years. In Israel, just imagine that the court in the US would be stuck with the same people that voted against ending slavery in Dred Scott. And that would be the make of the court forever and ever. They will appoint themselves, you wouldn't be able to change them. Or the same people that voted against the New Deal. You can go all over the history of the Supreme Court in the US, but in some point in time, the court was froze, and self-perpetuating, self-appointed, preventing any new blood or new thought into the system. It also created a problem with the demographics of the court, meaning the ultra-Orthodox minority in Israel has zero representation in the Supreme Court. It's in the Knesset, they are 1/6 of the Knesset, even more, but they have zero representation in the Supreme Court. The Sephardi, one sub-ethnic group, if you would want to call it like that, within the Jewish community in Israel, that are, some would say even the majority, but definitely about half of the Jews in Israel will consider themselves Sephardic. They have like numerous clauses of 1 out of the 15. Now it's a very rare occasion you have 2. And you have Arab, only 1. Again, Arabs are 20% of the population in Israel, only 1 Arab judge. For many years there was 1 chair for women, but that changed, and now it's still not equal representation. It's a closed club in many aspects, politically, demographically, sociologically, and especially what I care about, jurisprudent-wise, meaning the court. I put aside position on political issues, but if you look at conservative versus activist, if that's the term you want to use, so you basically have 0, maybe 1 conservative judge in the court. I'm not talking political conservative, I'm talking judicial conservative, judicial restrained, or something like that. Doesn't matter if he's left or right, you can have on both sides of the aisle. So that's the current make of the court. To make it simple again, 9 members of the committees that appoint judges, 5 of them are non-elected officials, 3 usually from the coalition, 1 from the opposition. That's the make of the committee that chooses. You need to have 7 out of 9 for a Supreme Court justice, and to make things a little bit worse, the justices vote against the law, but usually vote as one. They consult with each other and they decide as one. I am a member of the Judicial Selection Committee. I was elected last Knesset, and the coalition, I was the member of the opposition then. The coalition almost never voted the same. You had 3 representatives from 3 different parties. They were diverse. The judges always voted the same on every Supreme Court nominee. So you have a very strong hold of the sitting Supreme Court justices on who will get in. We offer to change it, and there are many ideas on the table, but the general idea, and I published a book on that matter, why should the people elect their judges? And the main claim is, in all democratic countries, elected officials choose the judges. It's not a problem with independence of the court. If you take the example, Trump appointed about 300 judges. He went to 15 of them claiming that the elections was rigged. All 15 that he appointed said no. So the fact that you appointed someone does not mean he's your, he will do whatever you want from him. After, judges has this nasty habit of being independent. So it's okay, and you can appoint them, and in the US you appoint them politically, president and senate. In Canada the prime minister appoints. That's the way in Sweden, that's the way it works in Australia and New Zealand. Britain has some strange system, but they cannot rule, they cannot cancel laws, so it's a different issue. So, and almost most democratic countries, judges are being elected and selected by the elected officials, the ruling majority, counting on the fact that when there are elections, so you won't change the entire court in one Knesset time. Even if this government will have its all full time as 4 years, you will be able to appoint only 4 out of the 15 Supreme Court justices in Israel. You cannot hijack the court for one coalition's need, even if you really, really want.
So you said that it's a self-perpetuating club, I think was the phrase. Do you mean it is, or it has the potential to be? And
No,
if you're saying it is, can you give a clear set of examples of that? Just again.
Okay. So first, for many, many years, the best way, of course, to be appointed to the Supreme Court was to intern and then work for one of the judges, and it would be better if you were a family member. And many people that got the internship and then appointments, one from all were from the same, also from the same law faculty in Israel. A story from when my years in law school, I learned in Bar-Ilan University. Bar-Ilan University is one of the 5 then universities, but only 4 has law schools. So one of the 4 major law schools in Israel, always competing on the numbers in the bar exams and the percentage. Good place, very good place to learn. And the year before my year, all the interns in the Supreme Court came from one law school, from the Hebrew U. None from Bar-Ilan, none from Tel Aviv. Or maybe 1 or 2 from Tel Aviv, none from Bar-Ilan. And we decided that we are not going to interview. If the game is rigged, we're not going to interview. Now, the court was very worried, the Supreme Court, because it was bad publicity that no one from Bar-Ilan came to interview. It showed everyone that it was a rigged game. So they sent specifically and said, no, we're promising we'll get some people out. But you had to make, and it was not so long ago, it was 12 years ago, when my law school was already a very prestigious law school with experts from all around the world. But they would only take interns from Hebrew U because all of the judges were from the Hebrew U. Just imagine that all of the judges would be Harvard. No Yale, no any other place. So that was like just one law school. Another example, one of the, some would say the brightest and the most prestigious law professor was not able to be appointed to the Supreme Court, and the claim was she has an agenda. What was her agenda? The judges should rule according to the law. So terrible agenda. So there were, for many years, there were constant minority views in the court. People that constantly said, this you cannot do, not everything is justiciable. All major issues of law that were minority and majority. But okay, you can be a minority. But today there are almost on the main issues, there is no minority views. Everyone is from the same school of thought, the same school of ideas. And again, I give the examples of the making of the court ethnic-wise or religious-wise or otherwise. But so the court is really a closed group. You cannot be appointed, and even when you have, and that's the sad thing, that what the claim that Yariv Levin, the justice minister, said, that because the court, and in Israel, the common term, it's not a professional term, but many people call the Supreme Court like a branch of Meretz. Meretz is a political party, extreme left, and the court would always be their view, will always adopt their view, or many times will adopt their view. Even though it's a minority, now they didn't even pass the threshold last elections. They're a very small group, but in the court their views get a lot of attention. So the Justice Minister, Yariv Levin, said, the situation today in the current make of the Judicial Selection Committee, he said, when I'm in the opposition, I have 1 out of 9. Okay, I'm the opposition, so I have 1 out of 9, makes sense. But when I am in a coalition, I have 3 out of 9. I can never win. When the left is in power, they have 6. They have actually 8 out of 9. And when they're not in power, when they lost the election, they have 6 out of 9. Or 7 out of 9. It's the court takes the court is acting, and I wrote a book before the last one, I wrote a book called The Ruling Party of Bagatz. The Bagatz acting like a party. He's not acting like a court. He's making decisions on political issues and always to one side, which creates a big distress for the voters who for many years vote for the right wing in Israel, and they cannot change policy. And in all major issues, you can talk about immigration issues, you can talk about social issues, economical issues, how to keep Israel, Negev and Galil stay part of Israel. All kind of issues. I'm not even talking about Judea and Samaria, which is a different issue. That right-wing ideology wins the elections and loses in reality because of the Supreme Court and its emissary in the government, the chief legal advisor, which is also a unique creation for Israel.
So I'm going to come back to some of the points. I just want to do a quick time check. I think this is very important, but I'd like you to give as much time as you can, as you have, because I want people to understand your perspective.
I can do 10 or 20 minutes.
20 more minutes? Okay. So let's run through some basic points. The first one, you've spoken about some of the difficulties, okay? Some points that come back at you are that, for example, it's not similar to, it has some inherent flaws. For example, the unicameral basis of the Israeli system renders it dissimilar from the bicameral system over in the United States of America, not often spoken about, should be spoken about. I'd like to address it, but that's not my question. My question is, can you tell everyone how you want to adjust it, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll come to some other issues.
So I'll try to go over it. Again, the plan was set by the Justice Minister, Yariv Levin. Of course, it's a coalition plan. We're all agreeing to this. It's not something that it's a debate between the parts of the coalition because we agreed on that in the coalition agreement. So first we need to change the Judicial Selection Committee and to make the ability of the coalition, the government, the ruling party to appoint judges. And then when we are in power, we will appoint. When the left is in power, they will appoint. Fair game.
Let me stop you there. Do you mean that? Are you willing to make an adjustment?
Yes. The answer is yes.
You're willing to make an adjustment that would help to move the composition of the Supreme Court to be aligned with the people's will, if you like. You are currently part of a right-wing government. You're willing to do that knowing that if there should be a left-wing government that returns, you will face the pendulum swing. That's something you're comfortable with.
I think that's democracy. That's democracy. That's the offers that I'm offering. Again, it's easy for me because today, when I'm coalition, when I'm in the opposition, I have no influence. So of course I'm changing it now, and that's why maybe the left shouts because they have the power to appoint judges when they're in power and when they're not in power. And now I'm doing that. It will be some of the time my power, some of the time theirs. So I understand their outcry, but I think that's democracy. And of course, and I would say, and I did not mention my former positions, but before I was a Knesset member, first I was in the opposition just not long ago, so I remember what it is. But I am promoting this change I wrote about this change for 10 years now. Even before I was in government, before I was in Knesset, everything is written in op-eds, in books, and so anyone who thinks that I'm talking out of the fact that now I'm in power, I'm changing the rules of the game, and I will change it again when I won't be in power, something like that, have a heavy burden to show because I wrote about those issues when I was in the coalition, when I was in the opposition, the same. I'm talking about it like some people say I talk about it too much, but the same thing over and over again. So
the
yes.
answer to that is yes. So tell us about the changes.
That's the short version of yes.
I appreciate that. Tell us about the changes you'd like to make to this election.
So I want the make of the committee. That's the current offer. It might change a little bit, but the idea shouldn't change. That the committee will be made of 9 members, the same. It will be 3 judges, 3 ministers, and 3 Knesset members. And out of the 3 Knesset members, there will be in the law that has to be 1 opposition member. Not the case today. As I said, today it's sometimes like that, sometimes not. I want to have an opposition member in the law. So you will have a committee of 9, which the coalition have 5 out of it, and it will be a regular majority. Meaning the coalition can appoint judges. Of course, there are a member of the opposition and 3 justices that sits in the room and can criticize, can bring out any problems they see, can ask any questions they want, like an oversight. But also, I want to add for the Supreme Court justices, a system of a hearing, like you have in the U.S., in a committee in the Knesset, which the opposition is also a big part of. So anyone who will be appointed or try to appoint because he has some ties to politicians or he has some skeletons in his closet, whatever, he will be able to be asked and grilled about it if he deserves it, and then it will prevent appointing bad judges. But I think that's a democratic way to do it when I'm in power or when I'm not.
You've got this major problem here that seems to be at least part of the crux of the issue of the amendment or the reform or the overhaul, which is the override clause. Yeah. Talk to us about the override clause, and you just said something which I interpret as room for negotiation, which was, you said in the midst of one of your earlier sentences, it may change a little bit, which I think there is room for some.
There is a lot of room for negotiation,
right?
As long as we keep the principle.
Okay, but the override clause.
Override. Let's talk about the override clause.
Tell them about the override clause.
Okay, so here the Americans, of course, can't look at themselves as a small minority, but you are a small minority. What do I mean? There are about 6 countries in the world, maybe a little bit more, definitely major 6, that have a system that can be compared on the justice system scale with Israel. And US is one of them, of course, which have the common law system. It's the US, it's Canada, it's New Zealand, Australia, Great Britain, Ireland. You can talk about India. Basically, that's when you talk about the common law system of court, that's the way. Out of those, the US is very unique. You have a strong constitution that's very hard to change, and the court can cancel laws based on the constitution, and basically there is nothing you can do about it unless amend the constitution or pack the court. That's the options that the political power has, or, as I mentioned before, worst case scenario, actually worst case you can imagine scenario, civil war. That's what the way to overrule the Supreme Court rulings that canceled the Missouri line and in the Dred Scott case in the US. And the court said, the parliament said, let's abolish slavery north of the side, north of this line. And the court said, no, it's hurting property rights. And the court prevented it. And the only way to change it was changing the constitution. And the countries from the South were not agreeing to change the constitution in that matter. Outcome, civil war. Not a very good solution, but that's a unique system. Canada has a charter, some kind of a constitution, but they have an override clause, regular majority, meaning in order to keep the union in Canada the same, if the federal court or the charter prevents one province from doing what they think is important for their prosperity, views, social, whatever, they can override it. I don't agree with it, with some of their decisions, but that's the systems they created. A regular majority override, meaning that that's why the Quebec had a rule preventing people wearing this, serving in public office, which is discriminatory, I would think, as a religious Jew. But I cannot wear yarmulke, my head cover, or any Muslim, if I'm a Muslim, any Muslim attribute, if I'm in a public office in Quebec. It's a problem, but they did it through the override mechanism because they believe that's the way to keep Quebec the way they think. Problem, not a problem, put it aside, that's the system. Also now recently Ontario did it on the strike of the teachers union they did an override clause. So Canada has overrides. They have a constitution. The court can cancel laws, but every provincial parliament and the federal parliament has the ability to do an override. Great Britain, the court cannot cancel laws, full stop. They don't have a written constitution at all, and the court cannot cancel law. You can give an order of non-compliance, which has zero effect on the law if he thinks it's against human rights or some other aspect, but the law stays in the book. Only the parliament can change the law. That's the rule in Great Britain. That's also the rule in New Zealand. Also, same system. They have a unicameral parliament, 120 Knesset members, apparently good number. That's also the number in the Knesset. And the court cannot cancel law, can give an order of non-compliance. Australia, a little bit different. If you go to the states in Australia, also some of them the court cannot cancel laws, and there is an override mechanism. So the system you have in the US is quite unique, and you have your own history and reasons to support it. But Israel does not have a constitution. And when the court says, I am canceling a law because it's against us, a basic law or some basic principle, he's basically doing it based on interpretation of very vague terms and that I cannot amend. I don't have a constitution to amend. If I think he's making a mistake on immigration law, the court is making a mistake, I cannot amend any constitution telling him you are wrong because there is no constitution. So the clash is growing. Now keep in mind that the basic law that the court is canceling laws based on it was passed in the Knesset with 32 Knesset members supporting it, only out of the 120. 32 versus 21. Not even all of the Knesset members were in the room when voting on it. So to say that the Knesset cannot override it, that's strange. As the Knesset, I legislated a law, a basic law, with 32 Knesset members supporting it. Now the same Knesset votes on the law with 61 Knesset members, and the court says, no, it contradicts what you did with 32 Knesset members. Hey, I don't think it contradicts. I think it goes on the same line. And I am here. I can cancel the basic law altogether. I choose not to. I just choose to tell you that when I said human dignity, I meant that we can have an immigration policy. I did not mean that we wouldn't be able to have an immigration policy because I wrote a book, a basic law about human dignity. It has nothing to do with it. You're wrong, Mr. Court. And the court tells me, no, you can't. So to ask that to override an interpretation of a basic law that I can change in a regular majority, I will need more than 61 Knesset members, does not make any sense. It does make a sense if we would have a constitution to say, if there is a constitution, there is a rule, you approved it in a referendum, in order to override it, you need either a special majority or a referendum. That makes sense. It doesn't make sense that to surpass the power of a basic law that was passed with 32 Knesset members, I would need more than 61 Knesset members to override. And that's why in Israel the override makes sense. What it doesn't make sense in the US, because then you say, what's the good of the Constitution if the Congress can go a regular majority and override it? It makes sense in a country with a constitution. In a country without a constitution, either the court cannot cancel laws at all, or if for some reason you want to give him that power, you need to still have the final say to the Knesset, which are representative of the body politic of the State of Israel. You cannot have an unelected court telling us what the basic values of the country is without a constitution and without a way to amend it.
Very quick, I want 2 yes/no questions, and then one, and then I'm.
You saw that yes/no with me.
No, but I really appreciate. I just want to reiterate: you giving your time to this audience is so gracious of you, and this audience giving their time to learn about this is so gracious of them. So I don't want to do anything other than seize the opportunity before us. Number one. Short question. Did you guys expect the backlash that you're seeing in the streets of Israel?
Yes.
You did. Okay. Question number 2, is it worth it?
Yes.
Okay.
To say a little more, or you have another sort of question?
If you want to say something more, briefly, but I think they'll ask.
I would say the backlash is not about the judicial overhaul or reform, whatever you call it.
Okay.
The backlash is about the fact that the left lost power and does not accept it. The prime minister, former prime minister, now the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, sent a letter on a letterhead of the prime minister before forming of the new government. The equivalent with you would be between November and January, between the elections and the forming of the new government. He sent a letter to municipalities, do not cooperate with the new government, which is a problem. That's January 6th, if you may. But he sent this letter, and the reason was not the judicial overhaul. It was before forming the government, before the judicial overhaul was announced, before the judicial reform, whatever name you called it. It was because he lost power. He did not accept the outcomes of the elections, does not accept democracy, and that's what we see in the streets. I'm happy you can say it's big numbers, but compared to the people who voted in the elections for parties that do not participate in this or supporting the government, it's a small number, but still there is a group that does not accept the outcome of the elections. They are not happy with the fact that there are a lot of religious people in government. They're not happy with the fact of the MirYam, some of the declarations, some of them I don't like either. Members of the coalition, it's not about the judicial reform. As I said, many people in the opposition supported the same exact reforms, or even harsher reforms, when they were in power.
Next quick question. We repeatedly are told that part of the reason for this overhaul and part of the dedication to the overhaul is propelled by the legal woes in which Prime Minister Netanyahu finds himself and has found himself for the last few years. Address yourself to that, not in the terms of analyzing his legal woes, but whether or not that is propelling this overhaul.
Okay, so Justice Minister Yariv Levin was elected to the Knesset in 2009. If you listen to his opening address in the Knesset, 100% equal to what we're doing now. So, and in 2009, there were no cases, no indictment.
Hold on a second, just to press you. But you didn't bring about that overhaul in that time period. Yeah.
Just a second.
Okay.
In 2012, I started the Israeli Movement for Governability and Democracy, an NGO that is dealing with this issue. I was working on it in the past 10 years, again, way before any case of Netanyahu. So the need is not new. Now, why did the government did not push forward this in the past years? So first, parts of it were pushed and were stuck for many reasons, but some of them were pushed. Override mechanism, for example, was in the coalition agreement in 2015. Again, before the indictments, before anything, it was stuck because not everything in the coalition agreement you push forward at the same time. It takes time. But the major reason is that since then, the pace and the urgency, the pace and the outcome is the urgency of those acts. The pace by the court and the urgency of the Knesset to react became much stronger. The court has cancelled, again, 4 times immigration laws in the less than 10 years. So if you want to reform anything in the immigration, you must deal with the courts. You cannot do it anymore. You reached a dead end. The court canceled 3 times the ultra-Orthodox draft law. That's the reason we went to 5 elections in 3 years, because we couldn't form a government. One of the main aspects, one of the key components of forming a government is to solve this ultra-Orthodox draft law. The Knesset has tried to resolve it 3 times, and the court has cancelled it 3 times. So you cannot form a government if you don't pass this law. The court has cancelled a law trying to regularize some of the settlements in Judea and Samaria that were facing destruction and demolition for no reason, just for judicial and tyranny. People were asking to destroy houses, even did not even bother to show that they have any relation to the land that they're asking a settlement to be demolished on. So the court created this political crisis that Israel is stuck in for the last 3 years in many, many aspects and many, many ways. So in order to have a stable government, you have no choice. And 2017 was a key year in this issue, since then we didn't have a lot of time stable government. That's the first time since then. 2017, in Israel, for many, many years, the court has cancelled one law in every year, and it was after a long debate, and it was very. He took himself powers that he shouldn't have, but he was quite moderate in using it. In 2017, the court has cancelled 5 laws in 1 year, 5 major laws, and it reached the situation that if you are a right-wing government, every controversial law that you will pass will be cancelled or be deemed worthless by the court. So the situation changed, so you must react. Knesset and Knesset members and elected officials should react to the will of the public. So the will of the public is reform the courts.
So Simcha, these are all officers, as you know, and I'm an IDF veteran, and my siblings are IDF veterans. And IDF veterans are pursued through the legal systems throughout the world for prosecution. I myself have had complications with it as I've lectured under universal jurisdiction before it was amended and so on and so forth. And one of the antidotes to the pursuit of IDF soldiers in the legal realm internationally, including The Hague and so on and so forth, is what's called complementarity, right? That if a country has a system of legal oversight that brings sufficient probity to investigate alleged crimes undertaken by its service personnel, there is no right of a third party to launch an investigation to bring that soldier up on an indictment. Now, many people are saying that by adjusting this, you are diluting the potency of the antidote to unfair and reasonable pursuit of IDF veterans in the international legal system. And that actually that antidote has worked very, very well until now, specifically because of the independence of the Israeli legal system. Are we really stepping into the abyss in that sense, or are we safe? What are your thoughts on that?
Safe is not... this system of... prosecution against Israel in international forums is ever-changing.
Yes.
Without any connection to the judicial system. Today, Israel faces few legal proceedings in different places. Officers of the IDF were, as you said, you mentioned, you knew about it and you were involved in some of them. With the system, and of course you can say don't touch it because anything you will do might serve as criticism. If someone wants to say that if Israel will elect the judges like, as I said, every other democratic country in the world, that creates a system that should not give protection. It's not a legal claim. As some would say, it's part. Israel is facing the double standard of, I would say, anti-Semitism, because it doesn't make any sense that every country around the world will elect the judges through the political system, and it's okay. If Israel does it, oh no, then you're independent, and then you're not independent, and then you're covering for war crimes. That cannot be said honestly. Of course, it can be said not honestly, and then anything that's already the case today. Another issue is this reform has zero to do with the criminal justice system. We are not changing the way of indictments. We're not changing the way judges will rule on servicemen. we are not touching the criminal system at all. Unless you say electing judges, like any other country in the world, is touching the system, and then again we're back to square one. But also, and that's maybe you might say, if you will tell me that in order to protect our soldiers from unjust lawsuits around the world, Israel should stop being a democracy, I would say, okay, it's a little bit too big of a price to pay. So countries that is not, the judges are self-perpetuating and they're deciding every issue and they're making policy calls and you cannot override them, you cannot do anything. And they're doing it based on the constitution that they own created. And they're dealing on everything. They're having no justiciability limits and no standing limits and all the perfect storm that Israeli justice system is. And if you say, you must keep this crazy system that no other country in the world have, otherwise you will be unjustly prosecuted around the world, I say,
okay,
maybe it's not, I don't think that's the case, but if it was the case, I would say, maybe that's too much to pay.
Okay, so you're going to give us a few more minutes, questions by show of hands, please.
I have 2 minutes, I have to go, but yeah, I have, two questions.
Okay, 2 questions. Yeah, and who's the second question? Who else wanted? Yeah, Connor? Okay.
Thank you.
Please speak loudly.
Yes. Certainly. So the question I have is you mentioned that the idea is that there's this distance between the people and the courts and so forth. But that what you're trying to do is to help mitigate against that distance that's growing, and then the juxtaposition that with the fact that there are all of these concerns, all these protests and so forth, which seems like that's from the people. And so how do you find the balance between making this change to include the people, but it seems like right now, from the outside, looking in, that the people are not happy with this.
The people? We the people? Some people. Okay.
And then Connor, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, my question is, you describe the court system as being problematic because there is no constitution and they're overruling laws that were made by a minority previously. And when we compare it to the United States system, there's been some significant Supreme Court decisions like Brown versus Board of Education and Roe versus Wade that have fundamentally changed how the United States functions. So my question is that from how you're describing it, it sounds like the problem is that Israel doesn't have a constitution. So why isn't the focus maybe on that instead of overhauling?
You got time for one more? One more.
I won't have time to answer.
One more. Leah, any ladies have a question, please? No? Okay. Yes, Maya.
Afternoon, sir. My name is MirYam Institute. So my question for you is, did you serve in the IDF? And my follow-up to that is that a lot of us have worked with the IDF in exercises overseas, and the IDF is known as a very professional and incredibly effective military. And what we've heard from speakers the last couple of days is that there's a lot of IDF reserve officers, generals, national security advisors that are also out in the streets protesting this. So what is your response to that when you have some very seasoned veterans that are still advising your government on military issues and the fact that they are opposing this? What is your response to that?
Okay. I'll try to get everything. So about the constitution might be true, but the ability to create a constitution in Israel, if in the past 74 years they didn't succeed, and there are very good reasons why it didn't. I can talk for 2 hours why it didn't succeed and describe the history why it didn't succeed. It's not an excuse to keep a bad system. And again, as I mentioned, New Zealand and Britain does not have a written constitution. They still have a function in democracy. It's not, you can do it, and it was the case in Israel until the court took the power it shouldn't have to begin with. What you said about there are people, of course, and some of them, as you mentioned, are former IDF people, but that trust the court more than they trust the elected officials. You can ask yourself why. Maybe it's a social group. Maybe they think they're a minority. There are larger number of people that do not trust the court. The Supreme Court has almost zero trust in the public that elected this government, and there are good reasons for that. So now I'm not even talking about minority rights. Talk about minority rights. Major decisions that were made by the court were not to protect minorities in Israel. It was to protect from minorities that got his way through the Knesset, the ultra-Orthodox minority, which has zero trust in the Supreme Court, and again, they're not represented. So in order to, so I have a view on that. I say that, like it or not, there is no better solution than the people. And the people have the way to vote. That's why one of the reasons I'm opposing some ideas that say, let's pass it and make sure it's hard to change. I don't want the systems that is hard to change. When we will have a constitution, it will be okay to have a system hard to change. But what I'm doing now, if the people that are on the streets, the former IDF, everyone who oppose it, will win the next election, he can change it. I'm not trying to block it from him. And again, Benjamin asked it about the making of the court. I want democracy. I don't want one power winning over the others. So, and some people, and that's the some people that are protesting, and that in Israel, almost everyone is a former IDF. You asked if I served. I served at lower level, but I served as a volunteer. Doesn't matter. Most people are served in the IDF, and there are people that high-ranking officers that support and object because that's the society in Israel. It's not unique to have people, high-ranking officers that have a political view, because that's everyone in Israel. So they want it because they feel that the court will serve their needs even when they lose the elections. That's not a way a democratic system works. I think that the court has a very important role in protecting individual rights and minority rights. He's not doing it today. He's running the state of Israel. That's not the role of the court.
Simcha, you couldn't have been more gracious. There's a quick presentation, but I really appreciate your time and your thorough answers. And I should tell you that the next guest from whom they're hearing is Justice David Mintz in the Supreme Court. So they'll have
might
plenty
agree on
of time
some of the things.
Yeah, but you couldn't have been more gracious.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very quickly, sir, on behalf of the United States Military Academy, and I specifically work in the Department of Mathematical Sciences, so on the other side of the coin has our mathematical sciences symbol. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with us.
Thank you.
Share with us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your specific roles in the government, as well as the issues facing your government and in your country. And we wish you the very best.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.